Okie dokie. Let's see what we can do here today. I think it looks like it's getting ready to break again. Might get a push. I crossed up high. It's kind of interesting because I think did a little bit of both today. It's a low here. 495, lows 495. Kind of did a little bit of both of the scenarios. I had like two scenarios on AMC. It's always like the middle. I think it could potentially, it could be a cat ear, but maybe. Potentially it could just go, because this could just be auto reaction, support, phase B. It might. If we reject here again, we've been rejecting a lot off of 508, which I already knew was going to be a big deal, but it wasn't like, I wasn't thinking it'd be like a wall, you know. There's definitely like a wall there. So if we go down one more time, we're going to have to kind of figure out where it might go. It would probably be either a spring or breakdown. It feels pretty strong right now. Feeling pretty good about it. So, yeah, I'm not really sure yet. This could be a fake out. If it dives back below, my expectation is we're going to go down pretty hard. We're probably going to go find a creek to follow. We are chewing it up on the 6-minute EMA, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so there's a big wall right here that, first of all, like, if you were marking it off on the way down, then, and we did yesterday, you would have identified that as the likely stopping place. I think we said 508 yesterday, and I still think it's the stopping place. So this, thus far, has failed to build any kind of support over 508. So right now, we're having a little bit of trouble because we haven't been able to push that yet. In terms of like waves, it's actually pretty close to what we thought might happen. So there were two options. It's funny because, again, like, I think it kind of went in between them. One was like this, where you basically just cross up and go, and the other was down low. And I thought, well, we probably end up going down low. And we kind of did, we kind of didn't. So, also, hello, hope you guys had a good 4th of July. Just wanted to kind of get right into it, not waste too much time today, since we're doing a market close stream. So yeah, yesterday I think I had two scenarios. One was like this, and one was like this. We kind of did both, because we actually went down low first. It looks like it made a lower low, but that's just like a visual thing. It may have done it like on the 1 penny chart or something, you know, but it's not actually lower there. It's a double bottom at 50. What was it? Excuse me, at 495. So right now, the targets that I gave you were, you know, pretty close, but maybe a little bit off. If we were going to go for a spring, that's where I would put it. I mean, just to be fair to myself, I guess. If we were to come back down and we needed to dip low, we'd probably end up going right down to like 493 or something. So we'll see. It may not do that because right now, technically, again, it's double bottomed. It pushed up higher, and it seems like it's building out. And for me, I'm like, well, it made a higher low after making a higher high, and it jumped the creek. So you're like, what's there left to do, Booksy? It's ready to go. Yeah, if it can hold, it's probably going to just go. We might actually see some big movement at the end of the day today, believe it or not. Where to? Probably back up to this 520 area. You know, I can't be exactly sure where it would land, but on the whole, if if I'm just kind of eyeballing this, I would say, let me get rid of these markers. Because again, I'm not here to showboat. It's pretty close to what we drew, but it's not exactly the same. If it were to go right now, I would expect tap here and just ride. Probably, let's see, think about it real quick. Yeah, so I've got two marks. One is this yellow line, which I think is just the upward, I don't know, upward something, right? The other is this blue line. I think it's the upward trend, like the channel line. And then, yeah, this would be my expectation. I find this to be a little hard to see going into today. This is kind of what happened to us last time on Friday. You remember? We were like, oh, this is almost exactly what I drew. I was like, we might get a push up and then we'll see this happen. It's like, yeah, maybe. The problem is that, like, that doesn't typically happen very much on like a Friday. So basically you have a push up to the creek. There's like 3 intersections, maybe even 4 intersections right there. It's quite a lot right in this little pocket. So there's definitely plenty that can happen up here at this check. So my thought is you ride up to like 528. I guess there's a little tiny gap here too. Let's see, where did it close? It closed at 516. Oh, did it? That was not a end of the day gap. That was a middle of the day gap. I think there's a gap there. So this candle on the 6-minute closed at 527 and it opened at 526. You guys are like, that's not a gap, Booksy. That's like a penny. Yeah, but I think that's the marker. So it's not really necessary to mark off everything like that, because obviously there's no need to do that all the time. It's a pretty common sense, like, well, there's not really a huge gap there. It may not even exist on other time frames. No, it's there. There's something on the minute. Right here too. I bet it's there. No, it's not there. So it's not even there on the 1 minute. Nevertheless, that's still the ledge. So you still mark it off. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Anyways, so yeah, somewhere around 526 seems possible. Is it possible to not do that today? Yes, because in a lot of ways, this movement back down, it could come back down and make a new low. And that could be a localized spring right here. Like there's a bottom at 499. And I wouldn't put it past them to like drop the price down to 498 into close, which, you know, is right below max pain, and just kind of sit there. And that totally could be how the week ends. So yeah, just kind of like chop down. I guess the only thing you don't really want to see right now is you don't really want to see it reject fast below this creek, because that would be distributive, in my opinion. I think you'd probably end up down at that 430 level or the 490 level pretty fast. So there's a lot going on here, but just breaking it down into simple parts can help. All right. Yeah. So big picture, technically the 4-hour 180 is still way down here. It's like it's at 484. So there's still possibility we could come pretty low. My initial target for today was 491 to 493. We hit a double bottom at 495 this morning. We jumped the creek. That happened. And while we jumped the creek, we actually landed on top of kind of two in the process. These are more like cross trends. So if you're looking at them like waveforms, that's how you would look at it. So like waveform 1 down, 2 down. Maybe there could be a third one, and that could take you pretty low. So right now, my biggest concern is that we set up some kind of a distribution here. If this came too high, it enticed sellers to take it down because there wasn't strength. You could see this kind of cat ear and then drop low. And frankly, again, it's really not the end of the world, because until you could come all the way down to 480, 485 or something, and it would still be like, I would still be like, whatever. Because as a retracement goes, yeah, that has a very head and shoulder look, I know. But as a retracement goes, like, that's fine. It's plausible. It makes sense to me. We charted it out yesterday. So I don't think coming back down to this level to retest it would necessarily be bad at all. So it's just a question of strength here. Like, it's a question of liquidity, either spring or no spring. Spring would probably drive you back down here, maybe even lower. And you can see why. When you have these competing trends, you've got, there's a lot going on here. So there's one that's coming across this way, right? And you can see how this particular wave could lead you right back down to the bottom. So this is the one that I'm looking like downward along this white line. And that doesn't seem unrealistic to me at all. It's like, okay, wave it down 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a 5, fifth wave. Instead of just like an ABC correction, it's a bigger move down. And then another one that would make sense to me would be, and again, as a head and shoulder, that's logical. You've got kind of your shoulders on this either side of this head structure. But, and I have to say this, every time that this kind of a rising accumulation happens, it probably looks like a head and shoulder, because you're always coming back down to that early support, right? Or the preliminary sell-off that happened before the top. So it always kind of has that vibe. And I've talked about head and shoulders a lot lately on AMC, but they don't always act the way you think they will. Like, everybody looking at the head and shoulders on GME was calling for like 18 and 17. It's not out of the question that happens, but the nature of the head and shoulder that people see is not always what it seems like, right? And like, we were correct to say that, because as soon as this quote unquote head and shoulder finished, there's really not much else to say. Like, it just kind of pittered out, and went sideways. And I think that's the complexity of it. It's a complex head and shoulder pattern. So your head and shoulder comes up in an arrangement, right? And you can see on the left side, this keeps going back down. It keeps shouldering out. And so we might say that it's doing something similar on the right, just taking a little while. It's definitely taken longer than anticipated. So that could still result in downside, but the everybody that was calling for that 18, I think that was back here on like the 17th, and I kept saying, like, I didn't really feel like that was going to happen, because that's how Wyckoff sets up. It sets up with that first move looking like a shoulder. So you have to just kind of wait it out. Otherwise, you're going to see head and shoulders everywhere in the market, and you're going to be assuming it's always bad. So this could be a head and shoulder. Don't get me wrong. We're going to find out pretty soon if it is. But even if it were like that setup, I would still say, like, yeah, but nevertheless, if this is an accumulation, this right shoulder, then we should see a push right back out and just continue again, much like we did on this one, which also has a similar setup. It builds out as a potential head and shoulder here going up. And again, I think that's pretty normal for AMC, like that kind of motion right there. So just keep that in mind as you watch it. It's not that it can't be a head and shoulder. It definitely can be. I'm just saying, like, when I say shoulder, I'm not necessarily saying it's bearish. I'm just saying that's kind of the structure that we're seeing. So if it were to go down, yeah, my expectations are it's either 491 or 484. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Because it double bottomed at 495, it might give you a sense that it's accelerating. That doesn't mean it can't come down again, but you can see how, like, all right, let's say, for example, we went back to 498. And I know I'm rambling, but just be patient. If we went back to 498, there's a lot of ways to look at this. You could look at this like it's a 4 top, 1, 2, 3, 4. If it has that extra push, which is like a hook, and then you're like, oh crap, we're done for, sure. Definitely a possibility that you get something like this and still have some kind of massive drop Monday before anything else happens. But your RSI may be just resetting and then you're ready to go again. And probably going to be divergent at that point. Or this is just a simple like auto reaction, phase B, LPS. So when I look at this kind of stuff, I just sort of like remember like there's not always, it's not always bad. So this kind of a movement can and has resulted in the past in just upward momentum afterwards. It's either one. And I think that's important to remember. I can then go in and start making more of an analysis and saying like, okay, what do I think happens if it goes up? What do I think happens if it goes down? And which do I think is more like probable? So I'm not really expecting a whole lot today, to be honest. If we see a big push, I'm sure people get really excited about it, and we'll see if it can continue to advance back up to the top. Otherwise, I think it's fairly 50-50 here. Like we're basically sandwiched between 20 cents up or like 20 cents down. Pretty straightforward, and that's just it. So I could see how the waveform might give you that breakdown. And then I also could see how, well, while that might be true, you also have to recognize there's a much larger wave at play here. So even if it came low, this larger wave would take you back up, potentially. That's this guy right here. That's a much larger cross. Would take you back up to the upside. Makes sense? I hope that it's visible enough and that you guys aren't like frustrated by my lines. But that's kind of all I've got for you right now on AMC, because we're just in a kind of a middle zone and it's peaked over the creek here. So it looks like it could hold and just go. But if it dropped, then it would be, in my opinion, it's like, okay, there it is, it's distributive, because it would just drop back down through the creek. That would be just more distributive. So it's kind of like spring or LPS. That's all the real difference is there. Because I don't personally think that it would just drop and keep dropping. I'm not saying it can't happen, but I don't think that's what happens here. So anyways, hopefully that makes some sense to you. All right, GME is a little different today. So GME had a pretty good little push. Once again, I kind of feel like GME has been on the edge because it's been trying to make an advancement here and just kind of barely scooting by. Like every time it's done this move, it's been like just sort of slightly higher in terms of a creek. We're just sort of eking out the side. And that's a weird place to be, because you don't, it's like, well, Booksy, you're just flat, Well, Booksy, it's a double bottom, clearly. Well, Booksy, it's this. Well, Booksy, it's that. I mean, to be honest, like when I said this Wednesday, I looked at this and I thought, it pushed up here back on the 28th and it sold back down through. And that's just a minor distribution for a top here, but it also checked like a big level in my opinion. So I was like, at the same time, so both can be true at the same time. It is a minor distribution on the micro, but it also happens to be that it's pushing a creek and then rejecting back down through it. So it's kind of opening and closing a candle while doing a push up through that creek. So it ends up, as you can tell on RSI, being a divergent from the 26th through the 28th. And then you see that peak up through the creek results in this big sell-off. We got a gap, so we mark the gap off. Why am I doing a recap? Because it's important, again, to note like where we are. I don't think I've really changed these lines at all since I first charted this, because it doesn't need to be changed. Like, to me, this was a pretty simple, like straightforward, like, all right, we've got a waveform cross here. And so, unfortunately, the answer that I came up with was that, well, it kind of looks like it's just rejecting, because you're not getting, and it might be part of the play, but you're not getting the advancement, you know, at least not in terms of breakouts. You're kind of walking it down beneath this 2484. So you can see, like, we started with a higher high here, and then we immediately go back down and make a lower low. And then we're advancing again, and we're not getting back above 25. So 25, this level that I marked off, it's still like the most important level right now for GME. And I don't think there's any level that's more important at this particular moment in time, because starting back here on the 21st, they marked it off, institutional sellers, 2505, marked it off as this is where the floor is, right? You can see it's the most heavily traded, but before that happened, it was marked off in this sell-off. Like, we're going to drop from here, and then the rest of the structure builds out. And so if you're looking at this as what has been accomplished, if you're just asking the question, like, what's been accomplished so far, there's only two ways to read it from the bear and bull perspective. The bull would say that, well, maybe you're just trying to buy up from 2240, right, through this kind of middle area that wasn't heavily explored previously. That would be true, I think, to a degree, because if you look back, the previous ranges, this was not explored when we first came up. We jumped over it in regular trading hours. Again, I'm looking at a region from about 2270 up to 2460. And then when we built out that little bottom in mid-May, again, we just really didn't explore it. We actually gapped through it again, gapping up from about 23, which is just slightly above that region. So one might say that, like, really all we're doing right now is just kind of trading that middle that we missed. And so the idea of it knocking itself back down, of institutions knocking it back down around that 24 or 2505 level, 25 level, makes sense. So from a bull perspective, you'd probably just say, well, I think it's just a way to buy up and gain liquidity down bottom in an area that was missed, that largely wasn't traded. And then once we're done, we just leave. It's the middle. So we went bottom to top to middle, and then we run. I would actually agree that that's the best probably way to look at it, because from my point of view, I'm like, that's pretty much what institutions do every time. It's like they'll go bottom, top, middle, or top, bottom, middle. Just depends on the way it goes into the range. And then middle is usually where you leave from, because nobody knows what to do. So like, it's always trading from the middle. Institutions like to trade from there. And then you can just kind of skip the bottom or the top. You don't have to trade the top or the bottom. So they become really easy to like drive through, like up or down, which is probably why there's so much of a flip. Like, you have almost an even up and down motive in terms of cause. From a bear perspective, what you would say here is you'd say that all that's been accomplished is false breakouts above creeks. We're still getting lower lows, even though we got that one higher high. And really, like, what we're doing is we're breaking down sideways out of, and this is true as well, we're breaking down sideways out of ascending creeks. So who's right? Well, both of them are right about the creeks. Like, bulls have advanced 1-2 times. Bears have also advanced, 1-2 times. So you guys are like, where's the first one? Right here. So if you look at it all we've really done is kind of just checked all the boxes, and that's not exactly like fun, because you're like, well, that doesn't give me an answer, Booksy. No, but just notice like where we are now. Like we are currently, again, if you were to look at this from the most helicopter view possible in terms of a wave, what I think we've accomplished is we've actually just kind of moved out of all the bare mole creeks, and we're now in this kind of open no man's land, and you're basically ready to go back through them either way. And again, that's the same thing as what we were talking about with liquidity levels. So I'm not going to say it's a roll of the dice, but I will say that I could totally understand why some folks think that GME might drop here versus run. So if you're in the boat where you're like, I think it's going to go to 17, then I get it. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I could see it, because it's really not a huge stretch of the imagination that this drops, I don't know, 30 cents, a dollar, whatever it ends up being. It's more like $1. If it drops like $1, it's probably going down below the creek at that point, or it's close to it. It's not out of the realm of possibility that it just drops $1 and then starts tanking all the way down to 17. And I would be like, yeah, okay, like there it goes, But at the same time, I'm like, man, this compression is so huge that I think you're going to go equal and opposite the other way, probably again up to that $29 level easily, and then some. So the bigger concern I've had with GME hasn't really been that. Like, I feel like I've been able to fairly easily see the chart and see what's happening with the movement. The problem isn't really that. It's more of like the nature of the setup being what it is. I don't really understand like the order of operations here. So we went down and made a new low, and that could be considered like a bottom, but the selling climax was definitely back here on the 17th. So just like what we had previously, it seems like we keep making push downs that seem a bit bullish because they're kind of dipping low and they're not buying back up high. But all the same, this advancement's very strange to me. Like normally if you go down for a spring, which you could argue like, well, maybe this is just going low, you cross the creek low. We did do that. But after that point, it just kind of stalled out. So what I'm left kind of shrugging my shoulders about is the whole holiday week business. Like at the end of the day, I think if this were not a holiday week, the patterns here, the clarity would be better. Like I think we would have had a quicker answer, because I suspect this topping action that looks like it's happening here, and again, it did breach above the creek twice, the new creek, pushed above it twice, maybe 3 times even. The nature of all that happening has just been really slow. And it's because we have really low volume. And I don't think that that's normal. So like normally if we had jumped a creek like we did back here, you would have seen it like go. It's pretty unusual for us to kind of jump and just kind of dawdle for a day. And I think, again, that's probably just because of the holiday. So speaking of the holiday, I hope you guys did have a good 4th. He never asks. No, I don't. So it's none of my business. If you guys want to do that, you can do it. And if you don't have to. So the 4th of July was good. I burned my thumb. So you know how we were joking about how 1 in 100 or 100 Americans or something lose their hand. I didn't lose my hand, but I burned my thumb. And you're going to laugh because I burned my thumb on like probably the simplest thing, the simplest firework that exists. Not those little like tiny firecrackers, but the sparkler. Like, how'd you burn your thumb on a sparkler? Well, A, I was dumb. But B, so I don't know if you guys have ever bought sparklers that have like a color effect on them. But we got some that were just plain, they call them like gold or something. They're just plain sparklers. When you light a plain sparkler, it just kind of fizzles alive. It just goes like, psst, and then it's alive, right? And it doesn't really ever change intensity. It just kind of, as soon as it's lit, it's that intensity. It just stays the same. Well, I learned something new this year because apparently when you buy the green colored sparklers, they put all the green in the end of it. So it's almost all like, I guess it's like coated underneath the powder coating that they use. It's like coated green. But apparently they put a bunch in the end of it. And when you first light a green sparkler, it like goes to, let's say the intensity of a sparkler is level, normally it's level 7. It goes to like a level 10. And it's just enough of an intensity that if you happen to be holding a regular sized lighter, it will burn your thumb. So I was holding a regular lighter, not one of those ones that has the extension, not a match. And when it first comes alive, it goes green. It's this big ball of green. It's like, and then it goes back to normal fizzle size. So we had done all the regular sparklers first. And so in my mind, I'm thinking it's the same as those. Oh, it's going to have green. That's cool. Well, as soon as I lit up the very first one, it just blew up. It got huge. And I was like, what the, it just burned the whole top of my thumb. You guys are like, how bad? I don't know. It's not blistering yet, but it's like pale looking and pink looking. It got pretty much all around the base of the nail. Because that's just where my finger was in relationship to the lighter. So I feel dumb. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know how I could have known that. So then after that, I didn't do that anymore. I didn't get burned again. I was like, okay, well, I'm not putting my finger there again. Because apparently these things explode bright at first and then they fizzle down. The green kind of goes away anyways. Sort of lame. Rip off sparklers. It's like green for like half a second. This huge bright green ball. Anyways, use the extended. You should just use the extended lighter. That's what I learned. I don't know. We didn't have one on hand and I just grabbed what I could. So yeah. Anyways. Yay, America. Freedom to burn your own thumb. That's what I want. Well, you can thank the Chinese for that too. Booksy, stop being political. It's not political. China invented the fireworks, man. They had gunpowder. Give credit where credit's due. So here's my final thought on GME is on the whole, okay, I think it's in a bit of a, again, just like AMC to some degree, it's on a bit of a razor's edge here. If it can get back above 2505 with support, it's going to be moving fast. I genuinely think that's where it could potentially kind of, no pun intended, but kind of explode. You guys are like, you can't say no pun intended and then still say it. That's not how it works. Then you clearly knew it was coming and you did intend it. Fine. Pun intended. It explodes. So yeah, I think over 2505, it moves pretty fast. Not surprisingly, there's lots of in-the-money calls over 25. So if it happened to do it today, that follow-through should be pretty decent. On the 15-minute, you could see it going either way as well, because you could make an argument that this is sort of a build out on the middle and that it's an S curve and it's going to push up high. You could also make the argument that this is an M and it's failing and then it's going to drop low. And that's kind of where I'm stuck, because I think this price action, again, if it normally had crossed a creek like this, like I would have expected after it bottomed like early this morning that it would have just rocketed, and it kind of did, but then it just died. I think people in the Discord were right on. They were like, whoa, look at that candle. And I'm like, yeah, because that is the buy-in candle. Like, you should see it move, but then nothing happened and it just kind of fizzled out. And you're like, well, because normally, again, you jump the creek, you find support, you find higher support, you jump the low local creek, you should just go. So I think it's just a Friday thing and a holiday week thing. So point being, again, just I know I repeat the same thing a lot in these streams. I say it over and over again in different ways. But it makes sense to me that if this is the M right here and we're going to run, that this is where we would find support and go. And the only other option is back down to probably 2280. I don't necessarily think it breaks down all the way past the creek. So I'm looking right now at just a simple, what's step one if it goes down? I think it could go as low as 2280s, and that's about as far as I want to see it go at this point, based on the fact that it already came above. The 2141 isn't really possible unless it does it on the outside of the creek or jumps back over it. You can't see it break below this creek again. 1-2 times advancing and failing. This would be like a localized kind of UTAD type deal. That would be bad. So unless something like that happened, I wouldn't want to see it come back below the creek. Again, this isn't impossible because it could just be like a wedge, but I'd rather not. So we'll see. Right now it seems pretty stuck at 2460. And again, that's kind of where they marked it off when we came down. Institutional traders sold down. They purposely created a gap down on that trading session from Friday into Monday. And that's where we've kind of had a wall. So similar to AMC, which had like a 508 mark going Wednesday on that drop down, and even higher than that for AMC back up here at 527. So MPW looking okay. Kind of did what I thought it would do. Didn't come as high as I thought it might go. So there's a possibility that we still could go a little further. It would not surprise me if we don't end up going, again, maybe late day or something like that. Maybe we come push up, but it's missing a touch on this creek. So I'm not really sure what to say other than like, meh. It's kind of the same, you know, you've got what could be considered like a bear flag that needs another drop. Technically, it's found higher supports. Technically, if it finds support above the top here at 409, it should just be able to go. Why do you keep saying technically? Just tell me what's going to happen. Because, like, this is fine. Like, if you dive down and then you walk back up, you can walk back up and then find support above a previous resistance or a previous support level, like, and then you should be good to go. The issue is that a lot of times what we end up seeing is we end up seeing something kind of like that, but what we end up seeing is like during the day, for example, like on a Friday, and this applies to any stock. It doesn't have to be just this stock. Let's say you came up above here and then you close back below. Well, on the daily candle, what that is you're pushing a resistance 2 times, right? And then it could be a UTAD situation, right? And the cat ears, as we call them. But if you close down below it, that could indicate that you're basically just up thrusting and not able to find support there. It's just resistance. So anytime I see a candle on the daily and it goes above and then back below, I'm very cautious because that typically is not a strong sign, not a strong signal. Because you're saying that you're kind of pushing the resistance early, and yet for whatever reason it's selling back down. You'd still have to go and examine the volume, see if there's actually an upthrust action going on, because you never really know what that looks like until you get a little closer. But in general, that's kind of what I don't want to see. So ideally, this holds support above, and then that could confirm that you're not going to necessarily go back down. Otherwise, I think it's all but guaranteed you're going to go back down, unfortunately. Well, how low would you go? I'm still really bullish on this, and I know you guys are probably like sick and tired of me talking about it. But listen, if I'm right about it, it's going to like explode one day, and you guys are going to be like, whoa, you know, because I think it's a contrarian play. It has an incredible amount of short interest, and I found out it has an incredible amount of institutional buy-in. Something like 75% of the float is owned by institutions, which is really high. all things considered. And I want to say out of that, it was like 16 and 15% roughly was BlackRock and Vanguard. So if BlackRock owns 15% of this, my thought is they're probably not going to let it drop forever. And that was on July 2nd. So that post that I read about it, that was back here. So there's a lot of institutional ownership at these levels. And I think it has a potential for 100% upside pretty easily. So that's why I'm still watching it. I'm not watching every single move under the sun. So some of you are like, well, tell me about this one. Tell me about that one. I'll look at them if I can. But probably the most disappointing of all the things I've been watching has been IWM. In some ways, it's not a big deal. There could be just a simple wedging action going on right now. I'm going to try to draw that in a couple minutes. You could just be doing a backup to come back down to like 109 or 199 or 200. You know, very simple stuff. Like, there's nothing about this that says it has to be some massive breakdown, but there's a couple signals here that are not good. So like number one is on the 4 hour, we've yet to hold support on the 180 on the 4 hour. In fact, we've done most of our time trading below it lately, and this up thrust, all it's done is redistributed on top of the 4 hour. So that bothers me because right here was where it really needed to hold and change character. And this was on Tuesday. When it came down on Tuesday, I was like, yeah, it looks pretty good. But I also said on Wednesday that I thought this started to look more and more distributive. Like you're seeing these rapid up thrusts with big sell-offs. Somebody's trying to knock it back down. So there's two things that then I would be concerned about. Number one is what's the level it keeps trying to pop over, which is 202. Are we able to successfully open and close above 202? Not really. Like, except for that one hammer candle, almost all of these have not been successful at doing that. So almost exclusively, we've been trading below 202, and we're really not pushing it. We're really having trouble at that level. Second, while that might be thought of as like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's a compression, I'm also concerned because at the same time, what we were doing is we were kind of sandwiching ourselves between the creek coming down and the 4 hour. So you can see we've kind of pinched into this little pocket here and we've compressed. Now that kind of compression isn't always bad. Usually we see that kind of stuff before a bigger move. That's normal. It really is. So for me, I'm like drawing this little box between the 4 hour and where I think that creek is. And you can see what I mean. Like it's sort of just this constant like up thrust that we're not getting through there. And then we're dropping the price. So I had flipped a little more bearish on Wednesday because I said I didn't really like that this kept pushing up and it looked like a third up thrust, which really could just be an indication that you were going to go down today. And it did go down today. When it started dropping today, I just sort of shrugged my shoulders this morning. I was like, well, all right, you know, that's just instinctually like looked like it was going to happen anyways because of these moves. You can't jump over a creek 3 times and fail and expect it to just immediately blow up, especially if it keeps closing below it. What that indicates is that you're getting stuck and that sellers are too strong. You're not advancing. Somebody's trying to push it back down. But that being said, I did want to note that on the big picture, just looking back, I had wrote this out earlier so I didn't forget. I said on big picture, we probably needed to flush down out of this bearish looking flag in order to actually get a bottom. So like, here's what I mean. One of the biggest concerns that I've had in this region, there's two that I've kind of said it 2 different ways. One was that this is sort of like that curtain rod thing where you're like pushing up and then you're kind of failing to advance here. And so you get this really big flattening that happens and then you get a big drop. And how on the higher time frames, it really looked like it could go either way because you could easily see how it could drop straight down after sort of failing to advance. And then you're getting this kind of cat ear looking thing, right? Like big paw. And you're like, crap, man, is this going to just like dump, you know? That's a feeling here that I'm getting because, again, of this flattened RSI and the way this is like hooking upward. The other thing I was talking about was how it did sort of appear to me to be a flag, and that's again sort of saying the same thing, but when you have a bear flag, again, it's easy to be kind of bearish, but I want to make a point about something. Sometimes, we just saw this on AMC, so maybe that's a good example, but sometimes that bear flag just needs to drop. It just needs to like go. And a lot of times that just is a way of getting back to the bottom. So this just happened on AMC, which is great. It's an easy enough example. A lot of folks are going to look at a bear flag and they're going to do like flagpole analysis on it. I think in this case, the flagpole analysis doesn't really make sense because the flagpole was almost completely erased. Like, I don't know, 70% of it was erased in that big upthrust, which is strange, before it came down again. And then second, you really can't use a flagpole based on like 2 days of down. So if the pole was coming from May 15th down, you could probably make a good argument because that's like a month. And you could say, well, that's a pole, so this could be like an S-curve, right? Yeah. The issue again with that is that the pole is very weak, and technically it had an upthrust before then, and then it kind of resets. So it's like, that means that the pole is, I don't want to say it's completely invalidated, but usually when people talk about a pole, they're talking about a month plus of trading, like at least 4 weeks of trading in a channel. And again, we kind of broke out of that. So it's really bizarre to talk about a pole when you have this bizarre little move. I can't really reconcile this in my brain. I'm like, that sort of thing is bizarre to me. Like it basically did this. It broke out and then came back down, and it didn't really stay within the channel. So I feel like the pole's kind of invalidated. So then what I would probably do is use the other targeting method for a flag, which is essentially like it could come as low as the bottom. So it's very similar to a widening. They're actually really similar targets. If you don't use a pole method, you can basically just say, well, it's approximately it comes back down to where the flag is starting. And that makes sense to me because we had talked about previously like what would happen if it dropped, and we were saying, well, maybe it could come back down and retest 198. I think I said that number a few times. So I was looking at the beginning of the flag right here and some levels previously, and there's another area down lower at like 196 where I think there's a gap and little stuff. Hey, can you turn it down just a little bit? Hey, can you turn it down just a little bit? Yeah, that volume's funny. Some big stocks. So my thought is that this should all be treated as like one move right now, like from here to here. And we probably should just look at this as a simple retracement. When you do it like that, instead of worrying so much about the flag, because the flag's not really there anymore, it's broken out. Plus, we already had pushed out of it here and here. So like, if anything, you could see it as like a widening spread. I would look at this and say, well, what's the retracement? And you can see it's a 65% retracement. It's a golden pocket retracement from the bottom. So what if it wasn't a golden pocket? What if it goes lower? Again, does it really matter? No, because you can see the build out on this essentially marks off the 854 and the 786. So I'm thinking right now, like, this might just be a nosedive for liquidity. And what we would want to see from that is we want to see at some point Monday or Tuesday, it would need to just recover back above these levels. Like that has to happen. Essentially, if you get back over 201 at this point, you're over which is clearly like where we're being oppressed today. You can see that second candle on the 4 hours right at 201.99, thereabouts. So my thought is that like that makes sense if you're thinking of it this is like a liquidity dive to get the golden pocket retracement. Kind of eradicates the pattern here, and you can see like again our pattern isn't really that good anyways. We already had like a breakdown here and like a break up here. So it's essentially like a double flush. So my thought is at this point that a retracement is probably fine. If this ends up being like a golden pocket retracement, we may be in really good shape, even though it looks kind of bearish, to make a hard reversal. The only thing like we can't do here, I suppose, is we can't come back up and fail to get over 202. Like if we came back up again and we try to advance and we hook at 202, and then we proceeded to make a new low beneath like 200. At this point, I would say it's done, right? At most, maybe at best, you could say like something like that could be a double bottom, but I would be a bit bearish if that happened, because I think we've had enough trading here that we really don't need to do any more like major liquidity tests. So we should just kind of read the chart as it is, not try to second guess everything. So any kind of a hooking action, I'm just going to kind of say, all right, well, if it's a hooking action, it could imply to me that we're going to head back down towards 198. And again, 198.40, 198.90, those are the two levels that we hit on these bottoms. They're also the 854 and 786 levels on the retracement. So essentially, you've got a golden pocket retracement here, you've got a 786 here, and you've got an 854 here. Got it? Why didn't I notice this sooner? Well, nobody's asking the question. Well, I mean, I knew that there was probable reason that if you come up to a high, it's probably going to make sense that it maps out. I mean, almost every time you do that and you turn around, it's going to make sense that it maps out well on a fib. It's just sort of the mathematical ratios at play that you see those extensions end up giving you a reversal, because like that would also be a fib extension on this bounce and a fib extension on this bounce. The reverse of those is going to be a build out that gives you fib levels. But until you know like that's really like a top, or you think that might be a big top, you're probably not going to do the fib from like bottom to top. I was probably looking mostly at this guy right here, the previous one, and I did do that, and I think it was low. It was like an 854 down here or something like that. It was pretty low if it came back down to this orange line. But on the big picture, again, like getting a bigger retracement on the big picture and not advancing just yet, you could see a change of character pretty fast here. If Monday into Tuesday you can get that advancement, you should be just taking off, and it would be, again, very good, I think. Everything else about my timing is off, so at this point, like, I don't know, I'm going to keep my stuff on the chart, but like in terms of like this S curve, it would have to be over here somewhere. I'm not going to like worry about that too much. I'm just kind of wait it out and see, because frankly it's just wrong at this point, so there's no reason to sit there and like worry about whether it's gonna I mean, like, it didn't happen, so there it is. So I feel like at this venture we're not in like horrible shape, but again, I could kind of see how a bear might look at it and say, dude, it's gonna tank, we're gonna have a big market drop. I could understand that on that build out. Maybe there's an acceleration going on here because each of these higher highs has been a little bit pushing it. So again, just kind of like eyeballing it, I could see how that could result in a push up right here if it's a widening and it breaks the other way. But every time I do this, lately it's been like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense, Well, of course it does. There's always going to be, until it goes too low, this is still going to be in that pocket where it needs to be. So nothing about the move thus far has kind of erased that as a possibility. It hasn't come low enough to do that. So every time I've measured it, it's been fine because it hasn't dropped low enough to create a 50-50 situation where it's going, now it's not meeting any kind of expectations. It's still able to get up there and potentially hit those 214 targets. It's just taking longer, and it needs to make the proper moves locally. And like I said, there's nothing really here that suggests that it has to do that. So if it does break down, I would just look for it to come back to that 198. I still think that's probable. If we don't get a quick buy-in on Monday or Tuesday with that advancement, then I think it's probable that we head back down to 198. How does that play into everything else we've talked about, with these? In some ways it doesn't. It's sort of a reversal of the pattern here. If you go back and you look at the breakout pattern, at this point we'd probably say that if you counted them like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and you just were doing some kind of mirroring act, it's basically like us coming down, and I guess it would be from this top here or something, or that top there. I don't know how you do it in reverse. You wouldn't measure from bottoms, really. You probably measure from tops. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that, other than just it's probably not worth worrying about. If it's an S curve, then that means that it's not going to go that low. So, because like normally what I do on a cat ear kind of thing, if it was like mirroring like this, is I would do an S curve. But you have to consider like the first drop in the S curve. That's really all I'm doing there. And the first drop in this S curve is not, I'd say it's not a big deal, but it's not that big of a deal. Like it's pretty small. So it comes from like 207.76, 67 or something like that. So that is not a big deal. Like I don't know how else to say it. It just means that we would come back down to maybe fill that gap here at like 196.30. And I already had that as a possibility because we were thinking about how if it came low, it would probably come back down to this, which we measured previously, come back down to the larger S curve. So anywho, at this point, that would be more like a double bottom, and then you'd have a bigger reaction. What about everything else? What about all the even atom stuff? Honestly, I kind of mentioned it again previously. I think I said it like once or twice, but a lot of you probably weren't here when I said it, so I'll just say it again. I don't really think the even atom bottom matters anymore because once it hit the bottom and started flattening out here, that's not part of the pattern. That's no longer like an even atom. So as soon as it went flat, right? And then we had a big reaction up and we came down. As soon as it hits bottom, it would need to come back above near this top and start making like higher highs. Pretty similar to some other stuff we were looking at today, but that's the way it would work. It didn't do that. Instead, we actually stayed really, really low down here. And specifically, it looks like we're getting caught underneath, the midpoint from the previous range. So it's more likely a better comparison just to say it's going to be some kind of a, I don't know, just something different, but not even atom. I don't know what you would call that. You can say head and shoulder, I guess, but it's weird. Yeah. And then it seems like a shallower S-curve might be more appropriate. So I'm kind of bummed out about it because I really thought that the whole market might see a decent rip into this week and that we'd start seeing that going into next week. Never say never, but it is what it is. And if I got it wrong, I got it wrong. So just leave it at that. And you got to remember, like, I might get some of these targets pretty spot on, but at the end of the day, like, if the market goes a different direction, there's always a bear side, There's always a bearish target in mind. And it just depends on really the largest operators in the market. Like, where are they buying? Where are they selling? There were things about this to me that looked fine, and then there's things about it that have, unfortunately, they've kind of gone the other way. So I say it a lot. I say stuff like, well, maybe we'll probably know Monday or Tuesday. I do think at this particular point in time, we would probably be aware Monday or Tuesday. because unless we drop low and then we coast next week right up here and make a gigantic like hook action or something for a week. I'm not saying it's not possible. It's possible. But unless we did something like that, it seems pretty likely that you would make some kind of decision within the first couple days. Yeah. This is what I was going to do earlier. It could be a giant, or not a giant. There could be a wedge here, right there. This bothered me a lot Wednesday. It really bugged me because it pushed over the creek and then just came right back down. And I think it closed below. It closed at 201.79. It closed below 202, which really bugged me. The other thing is this whole week has been like pretty flat, like overall in the RSI department as well. There's not really a whole lot to say about it. You're just kind of using like major trends and just making assumptions about, well, I think it's going to go this way or that way. But it's ultimately like not really made a decision yet. It's not much of a wedge, is it? It's pretty weak if it is. Looks more like a channel. Yeah, I'm thinking it's more like a channel now. But that's okay. Still gives us some information. Because that high that got pushed, it doesn't really look like a wedge anymore. Yeah, so sort of a triple top rejection here at the current push out. We've lost a little bit of our momentum. Nothing too crazy to say at this point. Wonder what this is. I'm going to check that out real quick. This might be a trajectory marker. Yeah, I mean, there's no way around it. It's the end of a second push, so 1, 2. So it's one or the other. It's like the same thing every time, you know. Makes the market kind of boring because you're like, oh, we're just talking about the exact same thing we always talk about. It's like, yep, pretty much. When you get to the second, that's weird looking on 6 minute. It looks like it's widening. Well, that could be positive because a widening could indicate that you're about to change direction. Seems that way. It's weirdly widening for how boring the actual price is. You see how like boring the price action has been? There's not really much to talk about. You're like, it's widening, Booksy, but it's going down. That's divergence. Yeah, but yes and no. Because in this case, the widening could indicate that you have a big move up. If it were like flat, kind of like the previous one was sort of flat and going down, this area right here, this was kind of rising, this is flat and going down. I feel like it's widening. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me that looks like more and more volatility coming in here. Like that kind of stuff to me is curious. We could be seeing more of an RSI reset as opposed to like an actual divergence. Still, nevertheless, it's making lower. See, yeah, because that's like hidden divergence the other way. So I said this morning, I think on the GME Discord in our group, that the divergence means that it's probably going to go back down because on that big push-up that we had, the RSI was very clearly like not strong. It looked really weak by comparison, and the two highs right there, here and here, were way off from the two highs here. So I said either has to go sideways for a bit and kind of reset, which it sort of did, or it's probably just going to come back down from that top and just start heading low. But here's where I'm kind of curious, because if you do that and then you also look at the bottoms here, so I'm purposely kind of ignoring the previous range now. I'm just going to look at this area because, again, I think it's widening. You see how it's kind of like a funnel, like a megaphone? And you look at the previous area and then you check out those two bottoms Wednesday, at least on my chart, around noon, and then Tuesday first thing. Those are actually more of like a hidden divergence because you're getting a rise in the price. The RSI is coming down, but it's on the bottom. It's not the tops. So again, it's interesting because I think, I don't know, man, it's hard to say. I need to learn more about that. I wonder what happens if there's a megaphone on the RSI. Maybe there's some kind of a build out for that. I would be curious to know if a megaphone is bullish or bearish. Is it dependent on the direction you're already heading? Because I mean, the price doesn't look like particularly like a megaphone to me. Like a little bit, maybe. I don't know. You guys think it looks like a megaphone? I don't feel like it does. I guess a little bit. I wouldn't have looked at this and immediately thought, it's a megaphone. But now that I'm seeing it, I'm like, yeah, I guess it is. So it's kind of like a strange, yeah, it looks like it's megaphoning up to that creek. And then, so it's hitting that rejection here. Here. Did the mail come? All right, well, don't stay out there too long. It's drizzly. It's raining. My son's been waiting for his game to show up in the mail. I don't know. No? No. Just wait a little bit. Usually not here till around for another hour or so.
Another hour?
You waited for a whole week. Besides, it might not even be here today.
A week? You said it would take a week.
Yeah, I said it might take up to a week. I said 5 to 7 days. A week would be tomorrow. So if it gets here today, it's early. Or it's on time. You're doing well being patient. Just keep it up. Yeah, I don't know what to make of this. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. So it's kind of like double divergence. It's really weird, isn't it? Because you're getting like a megaphone up, but then a megaphone down. So normally if the price were going up and the RSI were going down significantly, I would say that it's bearish. But if it's a megaphone, megaphones can be bullish even if they're rising. A rising megaphone could be super bullish. And I'm curious, because it doesn't happen very often. Usually it's bearish. Like usually a rising megaphone indicates a change of direction is coming. But here's why I'm kind of stuck on it, because the RSIs are like near the bottom of the megaphone, and it's near the bottom of the. You guys are like, well, this is the 6-minute book, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, I know you're right. That's probably why I'm like lost in the weeds here. Yeah, there's not. I mean, there is a little bit of one here, but that's the thing is like this is different because this already came over the top. Like if you look at 15-minute on GME, I'm trying to learn something right here. I don't know if I'm doing a good job learning, but the 15-minute on the previous one, which is a good example because it just happened. This actually came up above. It became overbought, and then it quickly became oversold. But that was divergent after it became overbought, and then it kept rising. This never became overbought, though, on the 15-minute. So I was about to argue it with myself and say that, dude, it's just the 6-minute. 6-minute looks different because it's small. And I'm like, how could you break down? Because there's nowhere to go. Like, RSI-wise, you would expect there to be a turn soon. If it broke down here, there's just not that much space. So it's strange to think that this could break down and it's almost like I would anticipate another hidden divergence. Like if this broke down, somehow, I don't know how, but somehow it'd be more controlled. And if RSI went lower, which it doesn't look like it would, but if it did manage to go lower than 1691 over here on the 6-minute, and the price stays higher, you're in good shape. Because then you've got a larger divergence there. There is a bit of an inverted head and shoulder action going on. This guy and this guy. Because it came back up to the same level. Let's flip the chart real quick. Let's ignore RSI for a minute. Jeepers creepers. Okay. So let's say, for example, that I was looking at this upside down forever and ever. Like I didn't have another way of looking at it. I just looked at it upside down. I probably would think that this is fairly bullish because even though we talked about it working its way outward, and it definitely has done that, and it kind of looks like it's holding support, I feel like it's lost a lot here. I don't know. I feel like it would go up locally and hit this top at like 23, which is actually going down. And then it would go the other way. Because it just looks like a hook to me. It's really hard to say. Actually, I suppose if I were being the upside down person, I'd probably look at this and say that it's dependent entirely on how you interpret this right here. Because you could interpret this as a rising triangle, which could be quite bullish. Upside down land anyways. 1, 2, 3. If it can make a fourth, it might break. See, what's weird is it's pushing it higher every time. So this is coming here, here, which is actually lower because I'm upside down. It keeps dipping into these lows. Wow, it just started dumping rain. It's loud. It keeps dumping through here and rejecting hard. Quadruple bottom is not really normal. So I don't think it would go through there again. So how do I do... Why are you deleting all your stuff, Bugsy? Because you're thinking and you need to think clearly. Your chart's messed up. That's interesting. Actually, I think fixing that helps a little bit. I think it fixed the like this kind of walk down that's happened. I'm already on logarithmic scaling. I always keep it on log. Otherwise, this will be like really flat. Strange. Strange levels afoot. That's a gap. Oh, there was another gap up there. Yeah, there's a few gap levels all the way down to like 1727. Looks like it really might want to go there. All right, so if I'm a bear, I think that you're trying to get down to 1727, but I already knew that, so it's not like the biggest deal in the world. I don't know what happens after that. I guess it would have a reaction back up, but probably wouldn't come back as high. Just sort of eyeballing it. Frankly, it looks a lot like what already happened on GME on like the micro, on the bigger scale. It looks really similar to this, like this guy with this move backwards. So the only thing that's really missing at this point, if I were just looking at this like from that point of view, I was like, what are you talking about? It just looks really, really similar to this. Like the micro to macro build out is pretty much the same. It's just like a smaller version of the same thing. This top to this top. I've already done this before and I've looked at it this way before. But I think it's worth looking at it again. price is down. Everything's down like half a percent. So there's not really much to stare at in terms of the chart, anyways. Geez Louise, you can see any of this stuff. Oh boy, let's get rid of that. I'm just gonna get rid of everything. I don't know what's going on over here, so I don't want to mess with it. You guys are like, what if you're erasing the... I don't think I am. All right, so where are we? This is 2024. So let's keep this one, and then I'm going to go here and make this like a weekly chart. We don't have to look at it upside down, but sometimes it helps to just kind of get rid of the, let's just call it bias. Just kind of feel it out. It just helps me to not focus too much on up and down, but rather just focus on relationships and space and time. So I had done this before, and I thought, they look suspiciously similar because of the nature of like what's happening in those build outs. Maybe I should go to like daily. So this is on a weekly chart. On the left, it's upside down GME weekly. This is an upside down GME daily chart, and it's shorter. It's just looking at the last bit of the move. These definitely look a lot like flags, right? How would I do this? How would I do this normally? I guess it just depends on what you think. I mean, if you think it's really done, you would just say it's going to be a retracement, and then it could just continue back, which in our case would be continue back down. Like if I were looking at this in the upside down, why GME going down though? Why not? It's got space. It rejected along the creeks this morning. There's really not much else to it. Honestly, I think I would have expected this to happen. I think I would have expected it to get back to here. And we've talked about this before. I think this was like that big creek that goes to like 140 or something like that. And I mentioned if it went as the crow flies the direction that I thought it should go here, it would hit like 140 or something. We did this before. So I'm not doing anything new here. I'm just kind of observing as best I can. So what was the actual retracement on that? Not much. It kind of just went back to this original level. What is that level exactly? Let's get rid of that. Let's take a look. Okay. Yeah. The hard thing about this is an actual sideways action. This is all up. So we need to try to identify like the same markers. Top, bottom, cat ear, top. So if I were just looking at the big picture, I would probably suggest that this is a macro creek cross here. Some of you are going to say you can't do this or something. I always get that kind of stuff. You can't do this. It doesn't work. It's manipulated. Well, I think that's the reason you can. So that's why I'm going to do it. And otherwise, I'm not going to give you any explanation. I just think you can. So there it is, and there's the hit. Oh, yeah, I thought it was just random where it went to. No. No, it wasn't. It wasn't random at all. Whether or not they knew it was going to go there or not is besides the point. Whether or not it was orchestrated to get there is beside the point. It got there, and they definitely knew where they were pulling that buy button. They knew what they were doing. This is absolutely a waveform. It's really a double waveform if you look at it. Big wave, secondary wave. I'm telling y'all, this stuff really matters. I'm just so insecure that I have to keep saying it, I guess. So we're like, well, then look at the same thing on this side, Booksy. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess I should look at the same thing on that side. This is where things get kind of weird, though, because it already hit here. So my expectation would be there'd be some kind of like a simple, like straightforward, like it's got to do the same thing kind of thing, right? Because you'd expect, hey, if it did it like this and it reached that point, if it did it again, it should reach that point. AMC's at pain price? What a surprise. Yeah. I mean, I figured if AMC, yeah, this seems right. If it couldn't breach 508, which I know is really close to max pain anyways, that it would probably try to drop back low again. So I don't think they're going to let GME run over 25 without a big fight. That's looking okay if it can manage to find support. I think 450 is actually max pain for MPW, which is kind of crazy. That'd be like way high. It almost makes no sense. There's like a put wall up here though. If it did run up, I don't know. It doesn't really make a lot of sense though. All right, so let's keep going because we're getting onto it now, and I want to finish this thought. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is politely ask my chart to kind of move away. I know that those might actually be used, but I don't want to have them on the chart right now. So I'm going to hide these things. Keep the volume out, obviously. This isn't me erasing my work. I'm just grouping it together so I can make it be quiet for a little bit. That way I can have a more simple comparison. I'm going to get rid of RSI for now. We'll look at it in a minute, but I don't want to look at it right this second. So I want to see like the big picture here. And then I want to see the big picture here. So if I'm looking only at where the tops are, so far so good. This is where things get kind of challenging because I might actually need to like look at RSI for a second. I just said I don't need to look at it. I may need to look at it. Yeah, I mean it's a similar race back to the top. You can definitely see it here in the momentum. Here to here. There's the jump. It's weird because the build out is kind of reversed. It actually goes really low for a long time. And here to here, same deal. You'd actually expect it to continue down low. It didn't do that. It started rising up. Well, this is confusing. So it never really makes like a super strong low. This is the lowest it got. Well, nevertheless, there's only one of two places to draw it, either there or there. So in either case, there's definitely an M shape right in the middle here. You can see that fairly easily on the RSI. Like there's a press up against it and then it fails. There's a lot of chop on the price action right in the middle, and then it breaks above. And this is kind of where it bottoms out. It has another little micro cross, but whatever. I think that's the dominant middle, so I think we were right. Yeah, that's correct. So it's the same thing. But here's like, all right, so that doesn't surprise me. And that's what I've kind of been talking about. Like this whole move makes me feel like we're not necessarily going to make another high. What I've been watching is this, because there was a secondary push up in June for GME that came back to this like double tops essentially. So what I thought was we might get a similar kind of double topping action back up to 50 and then come back down and kind of slowly over time course back up to the next one. So now things are getting a little more spicy because you can kind of start seeing the build out as it is. I don't know what my kiddo's doing. I think he's going to be really disappointed if it doesn't get here, but I can't control that, so I don't know. Maybe it's not a straight line. Maybe the line is more like that. It doesn't really help me though. Mumble, mumble, mumble. Grumble, grumble. Did the mailman come?
No.
Oh. Okay. So, in some ways, what we're really identifying here is we're just identifying, like, in some ways, we're kind of identifying where the, we call it like the cross, right, happened, and that where the waves are going. And then we're really just doing the same thing on a smaller scale. And I'm making some assumption here because I'm saying that I think what we're seeing is that they're building out much the same way as they did on the macro level. So far that's true. So far it seems accurate because they definitely have a very similar motive here, and then back up to the top again, and then down. So you're like probably bummed out because you're probably thinking, well, does that mean the run is over? I don't know. I've said a couple times already, and I said it previously, I'm not sure we're going to go back above 50 again. I would like to, but I think that there's some kind of a repetition of pattern here that's causing us to sort of get stuck. So the pattern of trading is we find support at the blue line after doing a higher M-shaped move or whatever. We're pushing out, coming back down. We're bouncing upward and we're forming like a flag back down. In this case, it's going to the creek. And in this case, it's going back to the creek. So each one of these is like a creek retest. Don't worry too much about this kind of stuff, markdown or whatever. I'm just putting arrows there just to kind of indicate what I'm seeing. Strange. Well, this one doesn't return back to the creek though, does it? It shouldn't. I don't think it does. in theory, like if you're just using the tops and bottoms, it does. It like pushes back above. Maybe I'll just keep it like that. So in theory, this could come back through, back down to 16. All right, let's ignore the first part and let's just look at the second part now. I want to see the action and reaction. So when does this actually start making its way backwards? So there's a build out, and then things are getting a little weird because I'm like looking at the same pieces, but I'm looking at them as if they're different charts on different, but they're, you know what I mean? Like I'm comparing them as if they're two different charts. So this is where I'm kind of going to focus now. This is why I brought the RSI back out. I don't really care too much about this stuff just yet, though it might play into it because a lot of times these trajectories matter later. Yeah, I mean that just basically is just sets up your angle for your M later. Could be good to know. That's way over there. Actually, it follows because you can see that build out ends up being kind of right around where the drop is. Ours is just different because it shares the same thing. So again, kind of debatable. Let's look at timing. Roughly half, but a little shy of half. Yeah, I don't know. It's like hard to do. How do we know where it hits though? It's not enough information. And we don't have a proper like trend yet. So like here's what I mean. So like originally when we broke down, if you had thought that this was going to be the trend, you would have been wrong. Because really this was just like a localized resistance, and ultimately once it breaks that, you kind of rise back up. We're doing the same thing right now. It's not like I haven't been watching it. It's just that as a result, I'm inclined to think that the first big reaction isn't the trend. I'm inclined to think it's just a secondary upthrust. It happens to have much higher volume, but you get the idea. This actually looks like it would take forever. The reason I thought it was going to go faster, this looks like it would take till August. But the reason I thought it was going to go faster was because, partially because the market was moving quick, but also because there's a lower push here. There seems to be like another compression happening, like right there. You can see it on my chart. It's like clear as mud, right? And that's that wind up. And this one's a little different because it actually, it does the same thing over here, but it's almost in the same time. So there's a similar compression that happens on this little guy here. Actually, it's hard to tell. These are wildly different though, like in that regard. And I know that secondary push went pretty high. It's just a little different. It's wide. Isn't that weird? This is completely different in that regard. So there's no narrowing. It's actually widening. Okay. So that's not the best way to figure it out. So what else can we use? Well, there's this creek jump. So another thing that this accomplished was after it hopped over, it was kind of coming back up. So both of those could be valid, but I'm just going to use the lower one for now. Ignore that top. And focus instead on these as a compression. Because it did compress here and compress here. This is way lower. This was pretty high up. Yeek. What if the compression's already done though? What if this like rebound already happened and it rejected at 33? And this is all like compression like to here. Like this one did kind of compress down and out. And then it rose back towards the top. Why does that matter, Booksy? Doesn't matter. Well, getting kind of lost in the weeds now. So here's where I'm kind of concerned. If you're not following what I'm saying, if you look over here on the left side, notice that the RSI, and I know we're upside down, so don't overthink it, but I notice that the RSI, this is kind of just the level it chops at after that first reaction. If you boil it down and you don't really think about the top, you just think about what's happening. You've had a big move up, there's an auto reaction, it finds a support, and then it kind of just chills out, right? It's possible, and this is what I've been assuming, that we haven't made this last bit yet, and that we still have to come back up and hit the top again, and then we're going to do it all over again and chop sideways over here and yada, yada, yada. So I'm kind of making that assumption. It's also possible, just because of the scale of it, that we're not really thinking maybe as clearly as we could be. It's also possible this flattening is like over. Because in this regard, there is no second up thrust, which is kind of like annoying. Like I think I'm just waiting for it to happen. Like there should be one more push, you know? But what if it's like finished? And we don't get it. As if it's finished and we don't get it, then what might be left is like a really fast move to the upside here that only goes to like 30 and then just starts tanking the other way. And then you're basically like on your way back towards, slowly over time, you're on your way back towards 17. I do think you get another push out, but I don't think it has to be like humongous. And it follows to some degree if you think about this as all how it builds out later. So don't use that. That's the outermost line. That's this guy way over here. And I think that indicates where the intersection is at a later point. But it doesn't really apply to where we are right now. So there is a clear and evident intersection there. Our intersection is pretty close. It's like right here on the July 16th. It's that simple, huh? Let's get it right. So if you're completely confused, like what am I doing? And you're getting kind of annoyed with me because I'm not looking at everything that you want me to look at. Just know that what I'm trying to do is identify some pretty critical creek jumps that need to happen, and that would give you kind of a, this actually did a really good job of perfectly identifying like the center. So right now I'm actually thinking that we should be able to do that. there's no reason we can't do it. We have the information we need. It's right there. And it does follow because this suggests that the middle where you cross down is actually right here on July 30th. Why does that make sense to me? Because that to me is where I thought we were going to be going down into August. So question mark is, how much of a middle is a middle? What does that mean? It's not. It's terrible. It's terrible as a center. It's close, but not quite. I was trying to measure it earlier, and I was like, I can't really figure out where it's supposed to be. The drop here into that region is the center, but it's not the actual like middle, the place where you cross. It's frustrating. So it'd be like us saying, I mean, I don't know how else to do it, but it'd be like us estimating the center, and it would go back to this top, the center as, this would be horribly flat for a while. Maybe like there. September, October, that makes sense. So you're going into election time. I mean, it makes sense to me. I'm thinking about like the timing that I already sort of thought. So maybe run up into, and then a run into. Oh boy, is it over? We're looking at an upside down chart of GME because it takes out the bias of, for those that are asking, I saw people asking, two things. One, it removes the bias of your what you want to have happen, because upside down by default means that it's going the opposite way. It's going down, but really up. Second thing is it allows you to do, in my opinion, it allows you to do a more unbiased comparison. And at the end of the day, no matter what you want to have happen, you really just want to get a good bead on the chart. You don't want to be in a position where you're trying to make it bullish or make it bearish, right? You just want to kind of see what's happening. And what I've already sort of thought is that we're seeing a sort of a redux of the first move down. I'm pretty confident about that. Like, the initial setup of this move is essentially exactly the same. They're basically just waveforms. It's not complicated. This is a gigantic waveform on GME. I don't care that everybody thinks this was some random thing that happened, that it was this big cataclysmic thing and nobody was prepared for it. I think Robinhood wasn't prepared for it. I'm willing to bet that some institutions were wildly prepared for it. That's my thought. I don't know how exactly, but I know that this setup clearly indicates that they, at least, very least, they knew the buy button removal should be there. But I've made a case about how this is I've done this before. This is like a time-based stamp. Like, this particular pocket that it hits in that 2021 area is not random. Like, it is triangulated. You can triangulate it with waves, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, it should not be timed out if it was some random event. So I'm not going to go any more into that speculation. But the point is that this is a very clearly like a wave cross here and then a huge whip. So you get the exact same thing right here. There's a build back out to the bottom, just like in the previous example, and then there's a huge whip. And if you can't see it for lack of imagination, I don't really know what I can do to help you except to just say observe the creek cross and then the pushback to the, in this case, the top. We're really looking at bottoms. And observe the same thing happening here on GME. Now observe how this reaction that happened on the macro, on this really big weekly chart, is essentially like the same kind of reaction that we're getting right now. We've already hit that top level. It's basically the same kind of reaction we're getting right now on a smaller time frame on GME. The only real argument you might make is that it's going to be different this time, in which case, yeah, it definitely could be. And I think we just have to find a case for it. But I've already found a couple setups that lead to like 140. I'm not really interested in doing that all over again. Instead, I'm going to try to read it as if I have never seen it before, and I'm just kind of observing the two together. And so far, what it's telling me is that there's some kind of a midline at the end of July. Like basically that's where the M cross happens. And you break back below this creek, this yellow creek. Okay? That's important because that would tell me that we're probably heading back, what? Well, we don't have a trajectory yet, but it would probably tell me that we're heading back towards the lows. In this case, I think it's 16 or thereabouts. I think it's a creek retest. I don't think, again, it's that complicated. I think we would just be going back to retest this creek right here. We jumped over it, checked it once. It doesn't make any sense based on the way this is going that we wouldn't double bottom again back down at 17. We definitely would. So if it does the same thing that it's done behavior-wise the last two times, then you would expect it to have some kind of a big retracement back down to like the 1770 area. Like that's the way it would go. There might be one more big push-up, perhaps, to either 30 or 50. But beyond that, I don't think there's a lot of debate in my mind. Seems pretty straightforward. So what I'm trying to do is gauge where the actual middle is. Kind of seems like it's not like every time it has to be exactly the same either, but it does seem to me like there's a there's strangeness to the setup, and that's why I'm kind of stuck. But I'm trying to now determine like how do you know if it's already had this second push? That's kind of where I was, and then I got distracted. So I'm not sure. From here to the backup, ooh, that's not good. Okay, so previously on GME, when we had that initial push up, well, it's not that simple though, Booksy. It didn't really go there. It's like loose guidance because it doesn't touch it. It'd probably be better to find another point of impact. But I can't really see what's going on, so frustrating. My big thing on GME lately is that it looks more distributive because of how it's setting up, and I don't know if we need to just see one more big push to get out of this area or what. But I've been talking about it quite a bit because of the cat ear type deal locally. So yeah, that's the creek right there. Actually, it looks pretty good on this time frame. I think it's a really solid, simple creek hit. So you all agree, right? So what we're seeing is that after this initial push up, there's a secondary reaction, and then it bounces out. We push around and we go back up. Yeah, so what's the big deal, Booksy? Well, if you look at this, you can actually see that these waves are kind of meeting certain criteria that are kind of generating these bigger swings. Like you've got this huge swing from 46 all the way up to 85. This was back in the June run up. I do think we're setting up where there could be some similarity, but I'm hesitant to say it's the same exact situation in terms of how bullish, because the build out is pretty different. There's not really much reason here to expect it would go significantly higher, unfortunately. That's pretty close. It's very wide. See that? This is the creek we just jumped over. There's like nowhere to go up. This is what we were talking about on the earlier in the stream. It doesn't have any room to go up. I don't think it's going to go. I don't see how that could happen though. How could it just erase? Well, it's that breakdown. It's just different. It's just a different setup in that regard. Like locally, it's not the same. I saw this move up to 30 something. I thought it's probably going to happen because it seemed like there was a desire to get there when you flip the chart right side up. But I'm not trying to like back out of what I was saying either. Now I'm looking at it like, yeah, well, I mean, really, if I'm paying attention to this and I think that this is fast, significantly faster, I would not say that y'all, it's the same, like, this is the same thing. Look at the bounce region, like, all that set up. People are just tuning out. Well, Booksy doesn't think GME's running. He's a shill. Cancel him. So there's a huge amount of space that needed to kind of be met in this build out. Like, because of the way this goes up, you have a very large push. This is a secondary push. So there's really a third push technically. There's not really a precedence for it right now. Although I don't think there's a precedence to break down like immediately. The idea of it going back up here would require something that we just don't have. So it's frustrating because I don't want to be bearish about it, but I'm just looking at the build out. The only thing I could tell you is maybe. This isn't the same though, but maybe this. Maybe this one. This is probably the one I was using earlier because it never checked it. This could get you back up to near the top. That's frustrating, man. So you can see the dilemma. The dilemma right now is that based on where we are in a build out kind of method here, I don't think that this is that complicated. I'm not looking at it as to try to figure out one-to-one fractal stuff. I know I'm kind of doing that. So I'm under the impression that every time that the stock moves, it could be significantly different. But that typically the way in which we trade across waves and all that stuff the rules tend to be pretty much the same. So like the bigger problem right now is that you can see like where we're building out, I can't really fudge it, you know. I mean, there's just not really any way to make it different than what it is. Get out of there. So the way it's building out right now kind of looks like this move is done. I know it sounds horrible, but that's just the way it looks to me. It looks like it already kind of jumped over and moved back up to this trend, you know? And like maybe we could see like 26 or 27, but that doesn't make any sense from the other side, but from here it does, because I'm looking at it like as objectively as I possibly can. You might say, well, yeah, but dude, there's no second hit. You see that the M shape here? There's none of that. Like you have a big M, you got a little M here, and then there's another big M. Like where is that on this chart? I don't know. There isn't. It's not there. But you would expect it to be here, like basically right now. Start racing back up. So I'm shouting out what I'm saying because it's mixed signals. Like on the one hand, we've kind of broken out of this trend. It looks like at that point you'd be going up, but because of where we are, we dropped we dropped the support is what I'm trying to say. So it's in a weird spot. This actually confirms the reason why I've been not liking the GME chart lately. Like it's in a spot right now where you could kind of, again, you could probably make an argument that as a bear that it doesn't go any further if it can't break above this trend. This ends up being basically the most important, because if you can get above this guy, you're clear to move back down decently far. Not necessarily this far, but decently far, I think. Maybe you're misreading it. Maybe it's supposed to go to that cat ear, Booksy. I could try that. So this point is where it goes to here, right when it's crossing over. So maybe like here. Nope. It's the same spot. It's the same spot, guys. It's right. Yeah. So you see the dilemma that I have? You're like, no, I don't see it. The dilemma is that once this broke this kind of resistance that it was underneath, and I know it's upside down, it went up and it goes back and it tries to find its way back to this creek coming down. The dilemma I have right now is that that's already happened on AMC and it's already below. So it's already broken through that creek down. That would be like the same motion here. And then it's come back above and now it's just sitting here. And technically there's no creek to go to. Like it's just, there's nothing to move to. And I know the build out's not 1-to-1, but it's basically the same. And it almost doesn't matter how you draw it. Like it's still going to give you the same results. I'm a bit frustrated right now. So like where is it? Where's the move? How could this be the same and different in that kind of regard? Maybe you got your line wrong. That could be possible. Maybe it hasn't actually broken through. Yeah, but that doesn't change this one. This is still super high. It kind of just makes me feel like there's not much left to it. Like I know visually what I'm looking at, look at this visually, you're like, well, dude, visually it looks like it would just go down. Like it would go up to 34. That's the level you've been talking about. Why are you second guessing yourself? Well, I agree. I think visually it looks like it go to 34 and then we'll see. You know, maybe you can go higher, but I think it could possibly go all the way up to 40 again. Visually, it looks like it would just do this, you know. I think what's challenging is there's no waveform. It's like this whole week, this whole last couple weeks has really just been, really it's just this last week. It's just messed with it quite a bit. This build out's all kinds of whack. I mean, that's another way to do it, maybe just like a lower creek. It's just like nowhere to go. It looks like you would just go to 25, 50 or something. Like that's horrible, but that's it looks like you would go just to the previous top here, like right there. And that's as far as you go, and then you start back down. And it would be slow, but it would basically just boil down to like, so it would do like this, and then just slowly kind of churn backwards towards like the creek cross, basically, here. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what it looks like. I don't know. I don't get it. Let's flip it back upside right. Enough of this. Maybe we can see something else that we missed. It's weird looking at it upside right now. My brain has been like looking at it upside down. I'm like, wait a minute. Well, like there's a more obvious thing that I probably wasn't looking at, which is that guy. So let's undo what I just did and try to figure it out. Booksy, how can you spend this much time just rambling about something? I kind of already knew this though, because like we already talked about, this is like setting up super low. It just looks so bizarre. It's like all this stuff is happening like on a slow motion, low level. It's like really compressed and flat. Okay. Well, there's a difference. So you see how I drew this? That's different because I drew it very much to this top. This one's drawn to the second top. So that's important. That could be different. I almost favor that though because on this it's different. In this case, it actually hit those wicks high. Nonetheless, I'm going to do it 1-to-1. That's the way you should do it. Gosh, man, this is like really close to something. There's the cross trend. That's the 50%. We were right to use that one. We've been talking about that one for a while. We've been using this guy for a long time. You've been following me on GME for a little bit, at least for last month. Almost all of June. That's always been there because of the two bottoms. There's a bottom back here in May, and then there's another one here in late May. You can see how that build out plays locally right here. We also talked about this because it's a 50% cross, and we were saying like if the wave completes, it should go back up to that point. And I still think that happens. Kid is like desperate for this game. I'm worried it's not going to get here today. if I'm being optimistic, I would just say it's got to just kind of gear up and go. Like it's basically ready. I think part of me is just bothered by how long it's taking and how weirdly flat it is. It is weirdly flat. Really weirdly flat. And it hasn't actually advanced yet. It's more like we're kind of in this like compression or something. Like we're up here like doing this right now, but we're too low. We came below certain creeks. We're like sitting beneath levels I feel like we shouldn't be sitting beneath. So did this. Yeah, but this is all downward facing. See, this is where the problems are. It's weak. Weaker looking. Does the mailman come? He's going to drive by. You're not going to miss him. He's probably just late because of the extra day. They had a holiday, so they're probably just having to deliver an extra day of mail. It takes longer. Yeah, I already kind of knew that, though. This is the other one I talked about here and there. We broke down beneath it, so it's aggravating. This is different, though. This one doesn't match the same. Maybe that's not the right one to use. This is super annoying. It had to be there. I don't get it. Like this. This doesn't make any sense. So when this jumps over, yeah, and then there's a compression here. And it is beneath them. Okay, well, it is hard to be patient. So what I'm thinking is that you see something like this going Monday, Tuesday, if it's gonna go, and if it's not, we're probably gonna just hook. And it's pretty similar. I know they both go up, but I kind of expect that's where it's determined. As I'm staring at this chart, I'm staring at it. I just did a comparison over and over again. The confusing thing about it is the lack of. There's a lack of clarity about, to some degree, like whether it can go back up again. 'Cause part of me thinks that it's already made an advancement that went the wrong way, too far, and it could just be like a breakdown that just kind of slides. We don't need another upthrust. Another part of me thinks that it's right there. It's just built out weird. So it looks to me like it would be Monday or Tuesday, and then you could have a sort of a Wednesday or Thursday run. Just looking at proportion. What's up?
We're almost done.
Yeah, 15 minutes. But we already talked about what my schedule was today. Have you taken your shower? Cleaned up?
What shower?
You know I'm giving you the dad eyes because I've said it like 7 times in the last couple days. Go shower. Jeez Louise. All right. Kind of looks like a Monday to Friday run, like a weekly run, if it were to go up. So I'll be honest, I don't really see how you can continue to kind of meander down in this area. Just based on this setup alone, it's kind of finished or it's going one way or the other, and which is good. I mean, I'd rather not have more waiting, just sort of see what happens. Just being straightforward about it, the way it's built out, it's building out in a deep compression, which I already knew. But the problem with it is we've pushed below. Some of the creeks that we've pushed below are not good. They make me feel like we're probably going to come back, that we could see something like this, where we just start meandering down. We get some kind of false breakout and then meander back down and just chop basically through July down into August. That's not to say we run, because the rest of it would be a walk down towards, in my opinion, down towards the 17 target. This is it. Like, if there's not a big move, I'm going to draw a line in the sand and say, yeah, if there's not really a big move, I don't think we're going to get one till like way later, maybe November, because I'm not really seeing the way that it's set up. I'm not really seeing why you would need it. There's enough space to come down. There's probably enough ammunition. I don't want that to happen. And I also think that looking at the chart, there's still a pretty clear path forward. So if you're wondering like how come everything's changed, it really hasn't. One of the conclusions that we drew from here is very similar to what we'd already been drawing, which was this push up to this midline. So there's clearly some kind of an intersection on Monday. That much to me is evident. It does look like we've jumped over the creek, that we're having trouble on the secondary one. We already knew that. Like, we'd already talked about that. So at this point, we're just kind of waiting for it to work out. If it doesn't work out, then we've got a target. MPW getting a last minute push up to that trend. Let's see, it's testing resistance, so it's at 415. Looking okay on the walkout. Much like other guys, I might expect it to have some kind of a SOS within a backup. So we'll see. AMC is built out pretty much how I thought it would, going to the downside. So I'm a little nervous. If we end the week here, we may be in for a bit of a drop. You're like, why? Why? Well, it's dependent on whether or not it's a hook. So let me see. It looks like a hook. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's dropped the... This doesn't mean this run doesn't happen. It just means that if you drop the... Actually, the creek held. This is getting weird. It's like it doesn't know what it wants to do. It's dumb. Or maybe. So it's like locally it's kind of distributive, but on the whole it may not be. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag. I would feel a lot better if it flushed to like 496. I know that sounds weird. I'm sure we want it to close over 5, but I don't like run-ups into close. So I don't know what to make of this. It's a good place to leave it for the weekend, though, I guess, because if you don't want people to know which way it's going, they always do this. What they do is they stick it in the middle of the cross. So you have like a cross over the top, and then you also have a cross under the bottom. Same old nonsense. I think overall it's good to be positive and just say, yeah, it held for the most part. Seemed to hold some pretty good levels here. Maybe we're in a bit of a wedge. That's never really something that I look at very positively, but it's possible we're in a bit more of a wedge, if you want to call it that. I don't look at wedges very positively because usually for AMC, those wedges end badly. We don't typically have wedges unless it's like a caddy or breakdown. So what I'm seeing right now is that this broke that upward trend. We probably won't know till Monday because I don't actually think we're going to see an after hours move. I'm not of the impression we will, but I can tell that looks like it tried to push out, and it failed. So there's not really any volume, so it makes it a little difficult. All the action is very flat. All of it's right around max pain. I figured it would probably try to favor high. We'll see if they can get it, if somebody tries to knock it down below. I suppose from this point of view, this is a really bizarre looking setup, isn't it? Maybe it's better on like the 30-minute or something. No, it's still ugly. I mean, it looks more like this than this, but I don't know. Like, it already jumped over like the downtrend creek that I would normally imagine, and it looks like it's forming a bottom. So like bare minimum, I would say like, oh hey, look, there's a creek cross, but then it failed to advance, so it came back down, and it's checking the creek again. But then the problem is that it also failed to advance back above. So like normally this is what you would want to see here. So it didn't do that. That would have been fine. I would have been okay with that. There's no breakout. So they purposely kept it flat because what it does is it keeps you in suspended animation where you're like, oh, I don't know now because it's apparently not going back up. It's also not really going down. Could it be a little spring-like thing? Yeah, so maybe at this point I might expect one of two things. Either a mild gap up to like 508 on Monday, followed by a run back down that tests this low here at like 501. So 508 to 501. And then they would have potential continuation back to the upside. It'd have to jump the bigger creeks and continue, at which point I don't really see any reason why we wouldn't just advance all the way back up into this pocket here. I think that's highly likely. So we would do a similar thing where we'd have to kind of advance around this area, so on and so forth. Or you need to drop first. It's hard for me to see a way forward downward at this point because they haven't really done a lot to confirm downside. And we've seen weaker hooks, I guess. But for the most part, I still would have expected it to come up again and try one more time. So maybe similar. Could see like a gap up and then a bleed through. That makes sense to me. Either way, I'm looking at this floor down here at 491 to 493 as a potential floor. So until and unless we break through this level and then also break through this level, I'm still going to maintain a bullish attitude about AMC. As I've already talked about very frequently what I think is happening right now, and I think basically we're just doing a giant M, and this is just sort of the last motion in the M. You know, you get a build out low, and then you push up, cross the creek, and then you build out low, and then you go. So my expectations are still the same, that even if we went down to 484 Monday, which is possible, that'd be a retest of the 4 hour. It's not impossible, okay? I don't want to make it sound like I'm bearish if it's down there. I'm really not. I think it's very possible we could get down there. Even if it went down there, though, I would still be like, okay, well, what happens then? You know, it's just a retracement, and then it hopefully just continues. This is very normal when you go parabolic to kind of go parabolic and then reach outward and try to find support. So if this support can hold here in this pocket, we're in really good shape. We should be able to continue an advancement to the upside. And yeah, and frankly, at that point, we're talking about pushing it, you know, like really going. I don't think it would be a little thing. I think it would be a really big thing if we made that advancement. So we should advance over 532 and then continue up to over 6. There's another thing I could check, which is most of the time these backups give you a really clear path over a 50-50. I don't know exactly why that is, but I always say it's like the slingshot thing, but I think it's more just about, again, like the way fib levels kind of work out on these charts. I don't know exactly what the 50-50 would be though, so maybe we already got it, because like this backup gave you enough to 50-50 up to this one. So maybe this backup gives you enough to 50-50 up to the next. It's just like a relay. I mean, it works. If you look at the high, it's at 595. And if you take that back down to the previous top right here at whatever this was, 531 or something, it takes you right back down to 480. So if your goal was to kind of get you 483, so if your goal was to get you over that limit, I don't know. I mean, so it works. I guess all I'm going to say. It works. Last time, I think in March, what happened is like after it made that move, that actually gave you the push to the 50% marker, weirdly enough. But it doesn't seem like that's possible here. This is a really big build out. Unless I'm like looking at this and I'm missing this guy. I guess this is a walk down area, but I don't know how to count that. Nah, the 50% in March was the SOS though, so maybe that's all there is to it. So if you go to the previous top at like 550, it is a succinct slingshot. The high. What's the high there, man? I can't see it. I'm getting old. I can't see this stupid chart anymore. 552. You guys are like, you're not old, Booksy. You're like a kid. I'm older than that. So is that low enough? If you go over 552, gets you to 616. So I mean, like, if it did go down to 480, 485 again, it probably gets you up higher. It'd take you to 628. So it just kind of depends on how low it goes here. And what I'm doing is I'm swinging over the previous high. I think that's accurate. If it's not that, then it's just swinging over this guy, which is really low. That does not get you very high, unfortunately. It just doesn't take you there. So I think my original estimation, it was 624. And it looks like it's the same pocket. I don't know. That's kind of like hard to do in future because you're kind of estimating where the bottom is before you get there. But I guess once we hit a low in reverse, we can do that and see how right it is. Well, I don't think we're going to close necessarily below 5, but yeah. We'll see. I think this is correct. But what about your chart here? I don't know. I don't really like changing stuff just because like, oh, I'm off, so I'm going to change it. I think the way I had it drawn was probably correct. But I also don't know, if the middle was 100% right. And we talked about that. There's weird little things like that. You can't really perfectly predict it. So my overall thought is if this is in a good place going into Monday, we should see it break above 532. We should see it push up to, in my opinion, it's going to be around 620s. That's going to be your SOS area. And I don't think we're necessarily going to get out of it without a backup, although it could race really fast. I think you're likely going to come back down. I think we'll reclaim this trend line here. This is the one I said rip earlier. I didn't really talk about what I meant by that. Normally, if it exits correctly in a very bullish way, that trend should be recaptured because it represents essentially like a trajectory and this will be like a larger M shape. So if this is M1 for a larger shape, then this is the middle, right? You would basically have the middle be like low M, big M, move up, and then you'd end up with another one just like this, but it would be ascending like rapidly. So you'd end up with a pretty massive like double M shape, or whatever happens. We can get through that when we get there if it happens. But yeah, there's an expansion that would go on. This seems right to me if we can make that advancement, and then we'd have to wait and see about backups and trajectories and all that. At this point, it looks like we've kind of missed our window for this intersection, which was Friday into Monday. So hard to say now. If you leave it behind, you leave it behind, It either means your lines are off or it's not going to happen. You don't have the guidance anymore. Probably would just default to the red line instead of the blue one, just to start and just say, well, maybe it's not there, maybe it's over here somewhere or up here. That's kind of the only thing I could do. It's like maybe pick one of the others. So I sort of ended GME on like a bad note today. I think I lost a lot of people when I was talking about that stuff. I got really annoyed. Market's closed now. I don't want to delay it and make it boring or whatever and just sit here and do it all over again. I just kind of keep it simple, okay? So GME has had problems. It has not broken out of the creeks. It does have some good things going for it in that if it did break out, it could potentially have a pretty massive move in store. The problem being that right now it's struggling to just get out of the most basic creek. So it's been very, very flat, little hard to read. My interpretation of that is very simply that, well, there's an issue because the way it's compressed, it's building out so low, and we haven't seen the jumps. You don't really have confirmation. It could come first thing Monday morning, I And I really genuinely think it could be very, very quick once that happens. I just don't have confirmation for it. So, yeah. AMC closed above its max pain. It's at 5. Again, I'm not really expecting after hours move, but I guess if it happened and we ended up way up here, maybe it'll be crazy fast. I don't really want more gaps, but if we left gaps at this point, I don't think it matters because my TA, the way I see it anyways, is that it would not stay up there forever. We'd come back down towards 6s later. So if we ended up leaving a gap around 5 or 550 or 6, I probably would just shrug it off right now. You know, a run is a run. So bigger concern would be if we, you know, did try to fill the gap and then kept going down. You know, that's not really what's happened yet, but that's what I'm saying. Like, that would be a bigger concern to me than just creating a gap. So if we do happen to run in after hours, okay. IWM closed again low. It closed at under 201. So really struggling here to find a lot of bullishness on IWM in the last week. It's been really transitioning from something that looked quite good to something that looks much more distributive here. Maybe it's part of the MO, but part of me thinks it's like the buy-in and the sell-off, you know, like people buying in on the lows and selling off on the highs. It could be that they're doing it to shake out weak hands before a big markup. That makes sense, kind of give them bearish indicators. Or it could just be bearish indicators, you know, bearish guidance, you know, that this is not going the way you maybe wanted it to. May not be because it's a trap. It might just be that you just got it wrong and it's going to go the other way. So I'm going to kind of just wait. I don't want to hold my breath too long on it, but frankly, at this point, there's a sort of a low here we could hit that we already did hit, which was the 199 or 200. So if we got a double bottom on 200 and then we advanced back up above 202, I'd be bullish again. So it's a little bit of a if-then statement. If we got any kind of a bottoming action on Monday and we create more of a hook than we already have, we did already up thrust to 201.27 and come back down. If we create another hook up to 202 and then slide back through again, it's going to be very touch and go because at that point, yeah, we're in a bit of a channel, but it's also failing to, once again, it would be failing to advance over the creek. It's like almost like a triple top kind of thing. It's hard to argue that that's bullish, especially if the price action has heavy volume tops, which is as lately has had very heavy volume in the tops. So I'm a bit concerned about it, but it did hit the golden pocket on the bigger retracement, right where it's at down here at 200. That's the golden pocket from the full move up back down. It's a good retracement level. So it really needs to be like succinct, just like AMC and GME. Thus far, like, my timing's just been off. Like, so there's nothing really good to say about it. Like, other than just, hey, the setups that were there didn't seem to pan out in the time that I thought they would. I think there's reason to be doubtful about the setups if they're not playing out. But ultimately, like Monday, Tuesday, we kind of knew that this week was going to be a bit of a bust because of 4th of July, that it could be a bit of a bust if we didn't see anything big Monday or Tuesday this week. We didn't see anything really huge Monday or Tuesday this week. Monday was and Tuesday was okay on AMC, but it's set up for a distribution. So you're like, okay. So then you're just going to come back down Wednesday and Friday. Oddly, that's kind of exactly what I thought would happen. I just thought we'd be up here, you know, or even higher. Because I remember saying that I thought Monday and Tuesday would be good on AMC and that we would come back down Wednesday and Friday. Mailman came. Mm-hmm. But on the whole, like, we're way lower than I thought we would be. So, I don't know. Mixed bag, I guess. Look, so you stopped trying to take credit for stuff you didn't. I did say that. I genuinely thought that Monday, Tuesday would be okay, and then we'd have a pullback. GME didn't do jack diddly squat Monday, Tuesday. I mean, there's really nothing to say about GME right now that I haven't already said. So GME needs to make an advancement in SOS above 2680s, maybe 2660s, and then it needs to find a backup support at 2560. And then it could potentially have a big run. So frankly, either next week's going to be awesome or it's about to be a pooper scooper month, you know, for most of these stocks, or at least the next 2 weeks. Because I can't really see how, if Monday or Tuesday doesn't go well, I can't really see how any of the ones we follow would be able to rebound very quickly. It seems like if this doesn't go well in IWM, we're in for like downside probably to at least 198, and it's like hard for me to imagine that happens within a few days. It's probably going to take most of the week. So I'm always 2 days late. I know. It is true. I'm often like late, or I'm early, I guess you could say. BlackRock looked pretty good, actually. I charted out BlackRock. I don't want to get into that right now. It's a whole lot. But that actually was an interesting chart earlier today. I did that while I was hanging out this morning. Ooh. We went way up on ChargePoint. Holy moly. Well, hey guys, what the heck? Why didn't anyone say anything? Because you're like, we don't care about ChargePoint. Wow. Yeah, ChargePoint squeezed something fierce. Same deal. It needs to get over 185 area with support. So, you got it. That's not it?
There's nothing
It's in there.
there.
There's nothing in there? Are you kidding?
No.
Did you put it in your pocket?
No.
All right, I'll come check. I took my profits and took off. Went out at one. I don't think it's done. I think it's going to go all the way up. I think it's going to make a big push long term up to $3. But I also think that short term, this is probably about as much as you'd expect locally. I think if it makes the right advancements, it should go up to about 210. It needs to get over the high here, and then it can back up and then run. I think it's in a really good spot. So, yeah, I talk about ChargePoint on the Discord more often, but no, it's not. But we'll look. Anyways, I'm gonna take off. I'm gonna help him out. Ooh, MPW, what are you doing? That was a weird move. I don't know what to deal with this. Invite us to the Discord. Remind me on Monday, and I'll work it out with you. All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.